Another big day and a hugely turbulent year for President Zelenskyy. Can you believe that just 7 months ago he was sat stone-faced in the White House while Donald Trump berated him, while he told him that he risked starting World War III, where he said he had no cards. In the intervening months, you, of course, went to Alaska, where he rolled out the red carpet for President Putin.
They've all been on a journey. Yeah.
They have all been on a journey and said, actually, Ukraine would need to cede land if it was going to end this war. Well, now, a very big different shift from Donald Trump. But as you say, these are words, a threat of sanctions for Russia, but always at some point in the future, a suggestion perhaps of weapons at some point. But when, we don't know. President Zelenskyy right now is speaking at a Crimea summit, and I spoke to him on the way in and asked his view on it. President Zelenskyy, are Donald Trump's words enough? Do you need weapons and sanctions?
Well, we will have peace, but I'm thankful for President Trump's support. Thank you.
So clearly, only peace will be enough for President Zelenskyy, and that is why here at the UN, after seeing that change in words from Donald Trump, the question being asked is, will his position actually bring peace any closer? The war that Donald Trump once claimed he could end in 24 hours, grinding on. These firefighters tackling a blaze in Kharkiv after another Russian strike in eastern Ukraine. So can a change in tone some 5,000 miles away in New York change this reality?
We have great respect for the fight that Ukraine is putting up. It's pretty amazing, actually. So, Mr. President,
a head-spinning shift from Donald Trump.
Thank you for this meeting. Thank you for your personal efforts to stop this war.
After this friendly get-together at the United Nations, Trump said he now thinks Ukraine can win back all lost territory, that NATO countries should shoot down Russian planes in their airspace. And then at a session with the French president, he had this for his old friend, Vladimir Putin.
3.5 years and they've gotten not so far, so we'll see what happens. But the other side can fight too, and they've proven that. Maybe it could be that Russia's a paper tiger.
Yesterday we had a good meeting with President Trump.
But on stage, the Ukrainian president made clear he needs more than warm words from the world.
For decades, just statements and statements.
Volodymyr Zelenskyy argued for more weapons and sanctions, warning that the global response to Russia was not enough and that failing to act now could spell catastrophe far beyond Ukraine.
Stopping Putin now is cheaper than trying to protect every port and every ship from terrorists with sea drones. Stopping Russia now is cheaper than wondering who will be the first to create a simple drone carrying a nuclear warhead. And we told you before, Ukraine is only the first.
Donald Trump's dramatic shift came via social media, of course. He fired this out on Truth Social. I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form, the original borders from where this war started. Why not? In August, when Trump rolled out the red carpet for Putin in Alaska, he suggested the opposite, that Ukraine would need to cede land to end this war. I asked Keir Starmer about it at the time, and he said decisions on territory are for Ukraine. But behind the scenes, sources in Europe and America made clear to me that they are not optimistic about Ukraine's chances of militarily winning back lost land. Russia's foreign minister avoided the subject at the UN.
Mr. Lavrov, is your president a paper tiger?
What's your name?
But in Moscow, the Kremlin spokesman echoed the idea of Trump being swayed by the last argument he heard, Zelenskyy's version of events. As for that paper tiger swipe,
Russia is not a tiger, it's a bear. And there's no such thing as a paper bear. So Russia is a real bear.
But will this fresh take from America change things on the ground?
And I saw also what President Trump tweeted yesterday, but at the same time also calling, for sanctions, European sanctions against China, for example. That's not realistic. I mean, it's not possible to have this kind of discussion to start. We need, firstly, to stand firmly for Ukraine, because it is also about our values.
Thank you so much. Slava Ukraini.
For a Ukrainian president who was humiliated by Donald Trump in the White House this February, this shift will be welcome, but far from what he believes his country needs.
And Anushka is still here. One of the other items this morning, of course, was President al-Shara of Syria in a suit, giving a very brief speech, but the first speech by a Syrian leader in a very long time.
Yeah, this is a real diplomatic milestone for Damascus to have him standing here. The last time a Syrian president stood here and addressed the UN was 1967. They were discussing the Six-Day War. 6 decades, he told the room, in which 1 million people have been killed. 6 decades of dictatorship. But as you say, to see him there is quite something as well. This is a person who once allied himself with terrorists. He then became the rebel leader who downed the Assad government, and now he is standing here as a statesman. But it is worth
asking for sanctions to be lifted.
Asking for sanctions to be lifted, and there has been some move in that direction. But it is worth saying as well that there is sectarian violence at home. Things are not perfect by any means, but a diplomatic milestone.
Anushka, thanks very much. Well, earlier I spoke to John Bolton, the former United States ambassador to this building, to the United Nations. I began by asking him if he agreed with Zelenskyy's warning at the UN. If NATO doesn't stop Russia in Ukraine, Russia will carry on across into NATO territory, and then we are in a whole world of new trouble.
Well, I think it's very clear that the Russians think that they can operate with a free hand. I think after the summit in Alaska, it was pretty clear that President Trump didn't want to take any strong measures against the Russian aggression, notwithstanding his nice words about Ukraine yesterday. He didn't offer any real assistance or say he was going to put more pressure on Russia. So I think the Russians continue to believe that they can continue with the campaign in Ukraine really without strong opposition from the United States. And I think that does put NATO members all across the continent in jeopardy. Maybe not tomorrow, but in the near future. The Russian incursions into Poland and Estonia, Romania, I think all indicate they are pushing the envelope to see what NATO's response will be.
You mentioned the words of President Trump yesterday, which did seem to signal quite a dramatic shift in favor of Ukraine. Do you think those words were meant, and could they be matched with actions by the president?
Well, I think actually they're a formulation to get him out of the Ukraine issue. He wished NATO and Ukraine and Europe well, but he didn't say he was going to do anything. He wasn't going to put more sanctions on Russia. He wasn't going to provide more direct assistance militarily to Ukraine. He'd simply continue to have the U.S. sell weapons, ammunition, and weapon systems at full price to NATO members in Europe, and they could pass them on to Ukraine if they wanted to. So I think the absence of more pressure on Russia and the absence of more help for Ukraine is another way of Trump saying good luck to both sides. I'm going to go preoccupy myself elsewhere.
You once famously said that if we lost the top 10 floors of the UN headquarters building behind me, it wouldn't make much of a difference. And that was pretty much the tone of President Trump's speech yesterday, although he went quite a bit further. Do you agree with his assessment, or do you think that he's actually trying to destroy this organization?
Well, I don't think he's got a coherent view of it. I mean, I think the criticism of the UN that's most important now is that its main political institutions, the Security Council and the General Assembly, barely function at all. I think it is a time for major reform, but I think it has to be done consistent with American interest, and I'm not sure Trump could articulate that. He doesn't like the escalators and he doesn't like the teleprompters. We know that.
And where does Trump's speech from yesterday leave any claim to world leadership from the United States and this president?
Well, I think he's tried to make the case that he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize for these 7 wars that he's stopped. Again, this is very much about Trump, and he sees everything through the prism of how it benefits him. And I think the speech in many respects was quite harmful to the United States. This is a time, I think, where U.S. leadership would be useful and appreciated around the world, but that's not what Trump is providing.
On Iran, the Iranian leaders have been speaking as well, and they've basically said, again, we're not trying to develop a nuclear weapons program, and by the way, could you please lift sanctions? I suspect that you don't believe them on the former, and you're not prepared to grant them the latter. But do you then agree with what President Trump did in Iran with his airstrikes in the summer?
Well, I think it was the right thing to do. In fact, I think it was long overdue. I think he stopped too soon. I think the problem is not just the technical capabilities of the regime, which have been set back on the nuclear side very substantially. It's the regime itself. It is the regime that threatens its neighbors through terrorism, through nuclear weapons, and you're not going to achieve peace and stability in the Middle East until that regime is removed. I think there's no question about that.
Ambassador Bolton, thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.